speaking to them at 4 o'clock at Parkside. Of course, our seminar goes to 4 o'clock, so note the problem. So what I've done is I've ordered a taxi for 6 people. That includes me and Mattia and 4 others. So anybody who doesn't feel like walking or is too ill, can, as like perfect timing, can hop in the cab as long as you breathe into a mask or something. The rest of you, it's at Parkside, please come. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but it can't be that difficult, right? I don't know. Oh, great, you don't know either.
249?
249, well done. Okay, excellent, okay.
I know there's this thing called a search cafe, and I know we are supposed to do it. I don't know for how long.
Okay.
I'm jumping in first.
I have no idea either, so it'll be kind of an interesting experience. Okay, I'd like to just make a couple of announcements, also introduce new members to the group. We're missing about 5 or 6 people, so I'm not sure if they're coming in or what.
Andrew sent his apologies.
I know, we got Andrew's apologies. He's supposedly making work. I don't believe that. I think that he probably was drinking last night. He was too exhausted. Anyway, just a couple of things before we actually begin the whole event. First of all, the university just won a number of AHRC PhD awards, and they're available for next year. So those people that would like to apply, including those people that didn't get an AHRC, I don't think you should take that badly. I think you should think about reapplying. The issue here is that the deadline is the 9th of January. So if you're interested in applying, you must see me so that we can do something with it. We're part of a consortium where we got over 411 AHRCs, which is phenomenal. Come on in, spread between 5 universities. Oh, yeah. Okay, no, I'll start again because you're one of the people who should do this. Why don't you sit here where I can bite you? Oh, damn. Sorry that I missed your talk yesterday.
Okay.
Guess what meeting I was in? Yeah, rep.
Oh, yes. Complete the lesson.
Okay, I'll start again.
Sorry, I was kidnapped by London Midland.
You were kicked out by London Midland. What were you doing?
On the train.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, no, Grace will probably know they're just dreadful. Cross city service.
They just kicked you out.
No, kidnapped.
Oh, you were kidnapped. Oh, I see. That you went in some other direction. You went to some other city.
No, I was on the right train. They just, they're creative with their sort of announcements.
Okay, that sounds all very interesting. I'll start again. No, that's right. BCU just won 411, one part of a consortium of 411 AHRCs, which is phenomenally great. We got it on the track A, apparently. So that's the good news. The bad news is it's split between 5 universities, and it's listed under a thing called Midland, I think it's 3 Cities Midlands, so something completely bizarre. So just go on the website or Google PhD BCU studentships, and it should take you to it, okay? So even if you have a studentship, but it's not an AHRC and you would like an AHRC, you're more than welcome to apply. You know, I don't think that should stop you if you're in your 1st or 2nd year. Again, more than welcome to apply, blah, blah, blah. Now, there's 2 caveats. One is that the competition is insane because the people that are making the decision is a consortium. So already that, when institutions make decisions, it's already difficult. And it's a consortium of Northumbria, Birmingham University, Birmingham City, and 2 others. I can't think of the other ones, the 2. Does somebody know? Oh yeah, Nottingham and, well done. Nottingham and De Montfort. That's right. We just literally heard last week, and they put the deadline at the 9th of January, which is quite incredible. So, yeah, exactly. Let's not go there. Anyway, so that's why it might be easier for those of you that applied and didn't get it to at least be able to apply, because that way you've already done the application at least 1 time or twice. For those of you that are MA students that want to, your second question, that want to go to the PhD, then do you want to do a PhD? Yeah.
Looking into it.
Then you need to, then you first of all need to be accepted by the university as well. That shouldn't stop you. Anyway, so I shouldn't laugh. That's just demonic. You need to go online, get this application, see how crazy it is, and try and deal with it. Mattia, can we have your application?
Yes.
Can we have your application as well? Because you also got the AHRC, right?
I don't know.
Oh, no, you didn't get the AHRC. You got the bursary thing, didn't you? Or did you get the
I don't really know because I didn't get any official paper. I just
Okay.
know that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we just got that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had it.
What?
But then not even to me they ever sent anything official. I'm paid monthly, but I never saw anything official. I don't have a letter.
Okay, let's start
that
again.
says I
Okay.
never
Okay, you know, I just want to parenthesis, every university has its problem. You know, it's like a disease. The problem that this university seems to have is on management research levels, where they just can't seem to finish sending out the files. Okay. So, Mattia, can we borrow your
Yes, yes.
thing? Can you send it to Grace, or can you just send it
No, I
around
send it to the group.
Just send it to the group, so that everybody can look at what's a successful AHRC application. It's very intense and it's very finicky, and you'll see when you look at it. So the advantage of having an AHRC bursary is you get to have all this free time and working, right? No. Okay, they have a caveat that they do expect you to teach, but you know, unless they actually trip you and catch you, they will not necessarily have to do that. So that's that story. No, January 9th is the deadline. It's absolutely critical that you come. Mattia is giving a talk today at 4 at the Research Cafe, and I'm supposedly your interlocutor. So unfortunately, the research methods is going to go till 3:30. Then Mattia and I are going to, as I said, catch a taxi with a sick person and 3 others. Okay, so whoever wants to come, and then you can just wander as well. You can walk to Parkside. I don't know where it is in Parkside. Oh wait, some of you said
249.
249. Okay, so that was that thing. The next thing you should know is that there's a book launch for Zatesis 1 and 2, which is an absolute miracle, parenthesis, On the Verge, Photography, and the Queer Textual Realities book that's all part of Article Press. And that's going to be on the 28th of November from 4 to 7 at the School of Art. So try and get there. There'll be things
They'll
to
be
read.
posted.
There'll be what?
They'll be posted.
Oh, I thought you said there'll be Costa Coffee.
No. They'll be Costa Coffee. Everyone.
That's right, that's right.
No, but it's gonna be posted hopefully.
Okay.
I'm gonna get that
Great.
soon.
Anything else? Did you have anything to say?
No,
No. Anybody? You just coughed.
sorry.
No, that's all right. No. That's anybody else have any announcements or anything? Great. Okay, so as we now have another new person who's just joined us.
Yeah, sorry for that.
That's all right.
I know
You never have to apologize for joining.
I know, but at the same time, by seeing the podcast, I see that all the time you need to say again who you are, etc., and I feel a bit guilty about that.
Oh, no, don't feel, well, if you want to feel guilty, that's fine. But the real reason we do this is because it helps people remember what they're doing, actually.
Themselves.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so we'll ask it even if you never were coming, believe me. You know, you'll see, because what's fantastic about it is that eventually people start changing very slightly 1 or 2 words in the title, and then they start, you know, getting it. Or completely in your case, yeah, that's true. So let's begin with Stuart.
We went this way around last week.
Oh, okay. That was quite good. So well done.
I can start.
Okay, why don't you start?
Well, yes, I'm on the MA part-time, so I'm a little bit of an interloper, just still exploring.
And your name is?
Oh, yes, that's a good point. Sorry, Stuart Mugridge. Fine art MA part-time, second year.
Okay, that's very broad. So what are some of the crazy things you're interested in, like analytically?
Yesterday I was looking at vulnerability.
Okay.
I did a presentation as part of the research in practice, which I sort of quite enjoyed in a strange way. But a lot of stuff came out of that in terms of the vulnerability, in terms of as part of the creative process. I mean, it's just turned into one of those things that has everything you focus in and it sort of trails out in different directions. But looking at the work of a few different people to try and sort of triangulate between them is sort of the term I used. And getting sort of nearer this idea of chance plus sagacity kind of is where you need to be. Sort of, you're
And what do you mean by
opening
sagacity?
well, you're opening yourself up,
Like being sage.
but you're sort of you're receptive, but you're also able to recognise. I suppose is really the seems to be the thing. I used examples of people such as Brian Eno, who talks about that sort of thing.
Good.
Poet W.S. Graham, who I really like. Yeah, so that's kind of a guess of where I'm at.
Okay. Excellent.
I'm Dane. I am interested in the role of real-time systems with regards to digital arts and art practice in general. My research focuses on methods of undecidability and uncertainty to look at how to reimagine or re-embody time in different kinds of sequences, feedbacks, loops, and all kinds of digital structures.
Excellent.
Wild wanderings and software spaces.
Wild Wanderings and Software. Oh, a new title comes onto the horizon.
It's sexy.
Yeah, much better. Much better. What did you used to have? It was something. Forgot. See? This is already better.
Comes and goes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dane.
My name is Mattia. I am actually Dane's alter ego today because I'm working on something that is almost the same. The moment I am looking at something I call the image of sense, or obviously borrowing from Deleuze's image of thought. And I think that a very good entryway into that is indeed the problem of time, real time, and other images of time. The reciprocity that takes place in the feedback loops of complex systems, and the emergence that these processes output constantly. And I look at these in reference to the image of sense, especially in art, because to give an answer to our sense belongs to an art piece. I find it is absolutely inadequate to go at it from a so-called art theory angle. Would be
And what would be an art theory angle?
well, all that we call aesthetic studies or theories of art or all the criticism that revolves around art. For the number of reasons, most of this we're going to talk about later, but because theory does not apply to art. Art works backward, generates an history and a criticism, but does not have an absolute outside, have a reference point. So the image of sense needs to change according to this turning inside out.
And why does it have to be an image? Why can't it be like a
The
sound?
image of sense is in itself a metaphor, which Deleuze has plenty of. And it works as a title at the moment or a presentation of the work, but it shouldn't be an image of sense, it would be sense per se.
Yeah, yeah. I think you might get caught on that because if you wanted to talk about, it could conceivably compromise you at the level of the ocular
Oh, yes,
and
yes,
consciousness,
yes,
and
which
is
is
it a
not what I'm after.
mental image or not a mental, you know what I mean? So be very cautious when you use that word image.
Mm.
Okay.
I'm Jakob. I'm a PhD student, practice as PhD student.
Yes.
It's real.
That's right. That's right. Very well done.
Last week I was looking at the translation. I was reading Walter Benjamin.
Which one? The Task of the Translator?
Task of the Translator and Unpacking My Own Library. I was looking at those two, and I was thinking about translation, and I kind of thought when a conceptual art stops being a language, which language is something that can be translated, can conceptual art be translated as well? Can something that, so I'm using word translation in very not language specific way.
Great.
It's not, I kind of look at the original and translation and the Heidegger equal, so A, when A is equal A, and identity.
You mean Heidegger? Oh, Heidegger.
Yeah, Heidegger.
Yeah.
A is equals A.
Yeah, yeah.
So I kind of thought when the originals equals translation, because then they create this singularity of plural singularity of two when they.
And what's the advantage of using the term singularity? I don't know. Damn it.
What's the advantage? I think what's the advantage of it? What to say?
Or what's even the meaning of it?
Well, when they come, when I look at because they occupy a space, there's a single one space. It's a spatial thing. It's not really one as a rupture or anything. It's more
Very warm.
takes like a certain space thing, I don't know how to say it. I know how to show it.
Excellent.
There we go.
The Bible will be very interesting.
I know how to show it. But yeah, but I'm looking at that and I'm thinking how that relates to the work I do, and especially in the installation parts, when the things tend to come together and the multiplicity of things comes together as one thing.
Great. Okay. We'll let that go for now.
Mhm.
Okay, well done.
Hello everybody, my name is Alberto and I will do the same thing he said. Not the topic, but the position. And I'm a painter, and my interest, my focus, my practice focus on what I will work on here in the future is mostly about glaze, atmosphere, and other concepts like the visualization or the attempt of visualizing 3D spaces with the limits of a 2D support, like not necessarily in a geometrical perspective way, but like to evoke the feeling of a space, like the feeling that the self body would have of a space.
Do you think a computer can paint?
Well, like a computer with like autonomously, like without any human being behind.
No, or a different way of putting the question is painting restricted to paint?
No,
But,
no,
okay.
for sure not. Like painting is just I think whatever kind of production of images, I would say, because I think painting needs to be something about sight, but it can be made in any way.
But if I were printing something off on the printing press, would that be a painting?
It depends the way you do that and the
Well
way
done,
you.
good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
I don't see any boundaries about that. Like the way I paint with oil is most of the time a hand printing technique. So there's no purity about that.
Yeah, interesting. And by the way, Alberto was saying that he was watching our recordings when we really got into the discussion of that painting. But because the painting was never on the image of the camera.
Yeah, it was frustrating.
So that's the thing. Anyway.
Oh, if I can say something, I don't know if any of you watch the podcast much, but she's very proud and confident, and I can always understand every word she says. But
That's
most of
being
the
me.
others, yeah,
Yes.
the most of the others are a bit too shy, probably the way I am now, and it's almost impossible to understand everything from there.
Did you hear that, everybody?
Much better.
That's right. That's great.
We need a microphone.
Yeah, we do need a microphone there. That would be kind of a good thing. I don't know where we get one. We used to have one.
You get closer.
That's right.
Hello. Jakob.
Yes.
I mean, it's a difficult topic most of the time. So
Yeah.
if you also need to struggle a lot with your ears, it's really tiring.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, that's point taken. That's great. I mean, I have to say that a lot of times people are so thinking about what they're trying to say, and they know it's going to the World Wide Web, that there's. So if you you say, well, that's a really good point, because what I'm trying to say is, You know, so it's kind of a way of protecting your own work anyway. But yeah, good point. So everybody, and in fact, I was trying to get people at the MA last night to do wall sits. Do you know what a wall sit is? You know, it's where you go against the wall and you make like a chair. You pretend like your body is a chair. You do like a right angle and you hold the position with your hands very relaxed in your lap for a minute. Unfortunately, nobody could do it yesterday. We only tried one person, but still. But I did it all day with different people, and they were like, this one person was like, I can do it no more than 4 seconds. Gosh. Okay, very good.
That as a punishment in my school.
That was a punishment?
Yeah,
kidding.
because you needed to hold on all class if you were not.
Yeah, the whole class?
Yeah.
Well, that's
You went back and you sit down against the wall and you kind of.
you had to do like a right angle sit for the whole class.
Yeah, and then when you drop down because your legs would not hold at that, then you would stand up and do it again.
Wow, where did you go? To school.
School. They taught me things.
They taught you things.
I never used them in my life.
That's right. And like wall sits when you're not using it as torture. It's very effective for relaxing. Okay. Okay.
Relaxing. It's a torture.
I'm Grace, and I'm just going into my second year PhD, and I'm interested in ectoplasm, so the spirit of the dead passing through a medium's body, and why they were specifically, or often the case, was female mediums, and there's kind of a lot of talk around the checking of the body and the sexualization of the photographs that occurred, so that's kind of what I'm interested in.
I think what's really great is that whenever you presented this more recently, is that there's never a question about the spirit of the dead going into the body. It's always about, the interesting thing is that it goes into a woman's body. It's like fantastic. Everybody's like nodding very sagely, yes. The body of the dead going somewhere. Yeah, good. Yeah, and I'll show you in a minute. Well, you'll see it in a minute. But your piece came out very nicely. Did you see? Have you seen the?
No,
yeah, it looks great. Yeah, I have to say.
Yes, my name's Lauren.
One of the people that speaks very loud on the tape.
I'm interested in notions of event. So this past fortnight I've been continuing with the Luciana Parisi book. So I've been working out, trying to work out more. Well, she's really I suppose what I'm interested in is like her notion of which better start now. Well, in terms of she's moving from Whitehead, and she's talking about his notions of eternal objects, and I suppose I'm thinking how I need to sort of work out how this relates to Lewis's virtual, sort of refer back and work that out, because she also like. She talks about differential calculus in the book. She references a particular bit from difference repetition where he talks about the zero relation to the differential calculus. But I thought Deleuze distinguished two sort of types of differential calculus, or people working in that, which I don't think she said. Well, I'm just trying to work out how it sort of varies, what she's doing.
And what do you mean by differential calculus?
Well,
or what do you think Luciana Parisi means?
Well,
or Whitehead?
But I suppose in terms of like Luciana, she's sort of distinct. She's sort of making three like she's making the first order cybernetics, second order cybernetics, and third order. Or she's distinguishing she's distinguishing kind of cognitive neuroscience from like neurophenomenological kind of enactive approach, and then she's wanting to sort of position her abstract kind of this sort of notion of abstraction in relation to the incomputable. But what's really an important idea she's trying to distinguish with this kind of programming zone of digital architecture is how it it can be used. It can be deployed in a way which is to sort of shut down really this notion of event, well, she's trying to say really that actually within this incomputable space, there's an event that can't be shut down, and this seems to relate to Deleuze's notion of the virtual, But in a way, sort of generative programming in computers, or evolutionary sort of programming, can be compared to sort of, the emergence of that can be compared to sort of the notion of event. But she's sort of distinguishing kind of in this kind of like realm or milieu between ones where it's sort of preemptive, the event is preemptive in a closed way, or ones where it involves a disruption which is incontrollable, which is quite interesting. But but also I think it's like quite a lot of problems for how she's setting things out. So that's why I want to work out how it differs from Deleuze's virtue, because I think that's such.
I mean, it might be useful for you to take a look at morphogenesis then and artificial intelligence, and to see the way in which computers are said to be able to think. And by computer, I don't mean like necessarily this. I mean, you know, a thing that looks like a computer. I mean like the little bots, because maybe they're like Pleistocene events.
Yeah,
The
I mean,
way you're
she's
talking
talking about like all that kind of zone.
Yeah.
stuff.
It's an interesting book. What's the name of the book, just so people?
Contagious architecture.
Don't worry. Okay, that's good.
Sorry, can I just interrupt on that thing about computers thinking? There was an article in the thing in the Metro this morning about the first supposed bot that's committed suicide. It's parked. I think it's one of these vacuum cleaners. Apparently, the owners swear that it was switched off, and it parked itself on top of the stovetop and burnt itself to death. So.
Okay, that goes with the ectoplasm thing. It's interesting. Okay, thank you.
My name is Natalia, and I'm doing PhD in fashion design. And my topic is unseen body in contemporary fashion, where I'm walking through the layers of a body as unseen object, and the clothes as a seen object, and the relationship between them.
Okay, so eventually you're going to be able to say this, so it doesn't sound like MPhil. Okay, I'm going to give you a hard time, because I think, I say this very respectfully, when you talk about your work, it sounds absolutely not as complex as it actually is. It is actually amazingly interesting, and I'll bet you that no one actually knows what you're doing. There's no sense of how this whole Japanese thing comes in. You didn't even mention that this time. And remember what the hunger is about what you're doing, because it's really quite interesting.
I need to talk with you.
All right, private chat. No food. All right, thanks. Mark.
Mark, postdoc. I'm thinking about the images of self and how they enable and disable courses of action. Like an artist or not an artist, that kind of thing. Let's kind of move on to fetishism, from ectoplasm to Lacan.
He points to Kate.
And ideas of spontaneity and freedom, and the way Kant abstracts freedom into a practical realm and leaves the technical practical in the theoretical realm, and that's kind of hot, that's being stirred at the minute.
Interesting.
My name is Samira, I'm a painter, and I'm interested in the process of blurring and the question of becoming.
The process of what?
Blurring.
Blurring. Ah, right.
I always said blurring in Russian.
I thought it was blowing, yeah. I thought, what's the blowing? That's interesting. Yeah, yeah, good, good, thank you. Does anybody do you want to ask a question, Painter?
I don't know.
No, okay. So there's a no.
I should see the painting first.
What?
I should see the painting first.
Aha, but you haven't said that about anybody else's work.
I know, but she said about painting, and she said she's a painter. Then I should see the painting first.
So all I want to say is I want to prod you guys a little bit more, because painting, on the one hand, could mean all these things. In fact, we have a PhD student, Jacqueline, who sends her regards. She's right now doing her PhD viva, so we want to give her all the best wishes. So she's upstairs above us on the right doing her thing. But she's making an argument about écriture féminine and making the argument that a painting is a term that one applies to something that you can deal with first dimension and second dimension and so on. And there's a certain kind of embodiment that sculptures can be it, and so on, but it's all part of how a painting becomes an event. Now, I have a feeling when the well, there's 3 painters in the room. We haven't gotten to the one that's crawling into the couch. That when you really think about painting, even though you're willing to say that it is all these other things, like, you know, sculpture, cinema, something like that, in fact, it has to do on some level with oil, acrylic, canvas, something. And I'll be willing to bet you on this. And I raise the challenge to think about, because I mean, there in the 80s and 90s, there was this obsession with calling everything a text. It used to drive me up a wall. So by the time, you know, everything was a text. So you looked at a painting, it was a text. You looked at a text, it was a text. You know, painters would come up to me and say, I've just written a text, you know, and they'd hand me a painting. I was like, okay, that is a text, yes. What's the ISBN? How do you reference it? I was like, sorry. So I just want you to have a think about all that, just generally. Good.
Okay, my name is Oscar. I work with photography and video, but I'm trying to incorporate
painting.
Augmented reality and holograms and this kind of virtual experiences.
And how are you trying to do that?
I'm trying to figure out how to do it, how to make my work.
Do you mainly work in black and white?
Sorry?
Do you mainly work in black and white
No.
or color?
In color.
And is there a reason for that?
No.
Used to be a reason. Used to be color was so expensive, but now, in the digital age.
No, I use in color because, I don't know, I don't think black and white fix in everything, you know, like, it doesn't fix for my work, you know why. Maybe
Okay.
because it's not, the form is not the most important thing, or it's more the feeling, and colors help for that.
So far I've heard that there's a gut thing that's going on with a lot of people, and that's got to be thought through at an analytic level. It's good.
My name's Andre. I'm on the MA, first year part-time. I'm breathing a lot easier today. Trying to get back to trying to understand our contemporaneity by using, and this is a slightly contentious issue, but using artists as my materials and the interest of the affect and effect of network cultures.
So these people are all part of your petri dish.
Possibly,
Yeah.
If I can sell it to them.
Okay. And how are you going to use these people?
Well, in the past, I've had groups of people remaking each other's work continuously over and over and over to the point at which there was nothing left of the original intent of anyone's work, and there are a few flaws in it that I need to try and think out and iron out. So that's how I've done it in the past, and that's probably how I'll start again.
Okay. Good.
For the moment.
Good.
Hi, I'm Francesco. So there's 3 painters and 3 Italians.
And 3 what?
Italians.
Italians. That's so
Are you
fun.
Italian? Yeah.
Ah!
So, I just came back from Madrid. I was there for a festival about recycling, making art through recycling. So there was a strike from the street cleaner, so it was perfect for us.
That's hilarious. Making it work.
Yeah, exactly. For us. There was this guy painting on egg boxes, and he called this egg cubism. It was quite amazing. He's on books, school books.
Oh, okay.
Amazing. So yeah, there was 20 degrees more than here. So when I came back, I got sick. Yeah, I'm a painter, but lately I would say I'm trying to. I'm doing something that is not 2D anymore. It's a bit 2D and a half or something like that. I'm using things from the streets, like pieces of food I find, and try to make a composition. And still, I use a canvas and colors, but it's something a bit mixed. It's not anymore just on a canvas, and I'm experiencing frame as just an artwork as well. So I'm cutting the canvas. I'm just playing for now, and I think this is the essence of art as well. So
Play.
yeah, I think you have to play basically.
Well done. Well, that's what, Picasso's position. That's why he always said it takes a long time to become a child. What he really meant was it takes a long time to become an artist.
I think so.
Well done.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm sorry I was late. I'm running to catch up with jet lag from getting back from Dallas, where I was giving my
Dallas, yes. Did you understand the accents?
Luckily, most of the people were from all over the US, mostly conference delegates. So I only saw one man in a Stetson.
Oh.
And he looked too moody to ask to take his photo.
Yeah, I can imagine. He would have gotten punched.
Yeah. So, I gave my paper on drama and Dasein. And on accident time, what I call accident time, which is when Dasein gets tripped up. And instead of performing the world performs you. And as usual, younger people were very taken with the idea, and older people, particularly those who've kind of committed themselves to the theatre of Bertolt Brecht, really didn't like it because I critique Brecht quite.
And what did you say about Brecht?
Well, I quote Edward Bond, who says, "Alienation's the theatre of Auschwitz." Which, of course, I realise is far too an incendiary thing to go bandying about, because it gets people's backs up, which Edward intended it to. But that was what triggered my PhD. I wanted to work out what the hell he was on about. And now I think I have worked it out. But I realise that saying it switches everybody off. So I'm going to stop saying it. But for light relief, I was reading Heidegger's Love Letters to Hannah Arendt on the plane. And I've just got to the bit where he's heartbroken because she's left him. So
it's unrelated to the fact they're both married to other people.
She wasn't yet, but
she was getting married.
Yes,
and she was going out with this guy.
Yes,
right?
she was affianced. So that's really interesting because he still goes on about being, even in his love letters.
It's going to happen to you too. Trust me. It's a disease, philosophy. Yeah, it just gets into your bloodstream and then you're finished. Good. Thanks. Okay, we're ready to begin. Just want to add, there's a discussion that's going on around a PhD, arguing that it takes 3 years to do a PhD. Now, that is just, in my view, completely nuts. And that in the real world, a PhD takes minimally 7 years.
I just know now that it's impossible.
Yeah. So what they're really saying is that funding will last for 3 years. But do not for a minute think that you are not doing your work properly if you don't hit the 3-year mark running, that kind of thing. There's 2 ways to solve it. One is you hang out in this class as long as possible before you have to register, and then you register for 3 years, A. B, you get the AHRC grant or some bursary for 3 years, and then you get some other bursary. Okay. C, you marry someone that's very wealthy. Something along those lines. Okay, these are more or less your advantages. Or you don't have to actually marry them. That would be so annoying. But you could like just get set up as by somebody like a rich sugar person. But do not for a minute think that you are not top of your class if someone says to you, you should be done. If anybody in the hallways asks you, that's not me, or not your actual supervisor or supervisory team, how are you doing in your thesis with that kind of concerned look? The answer is always fine. Okay, always. I'm doing just fine. Unless they have a need to know basis, there's no need for them to know. And fine stands for, as we all know, fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and exhausted. But they don't need to know that either. They just need to know that you're doing fine. Because it's amazing how the network works. And if you start saying you're not doing fine, you're freaking out, this and that, it just gets shelved in a little kind of memory pod somewhere. It just sits there annoying you. So, okay? So that's why I've been in all these different meetings figure out how to solve that completely ridiculous problem that is set up by the Tories, I'd like to add, anyway. And actually Labor didn't help, you know, and supposedly Lib Dems were gonna start keeping the university free, but anyway. Shall we begin with A equals A? Shall we go into Heidegger now? We ended up right at the point of the question of difference. Now I asked you, I think it was Jakob, about singularity. Difference could be said to be another name for singularity, or the other way around. Singularity could be another name for difference. Now, what that means in translation speak is that there are different ways of understanding how meaning is established. When I say how meaning is established, I mean literally how something gets understood, how something gets its communicative expression. To establish meaning has usually happened via the deep cut, or some kind of cut. So that this is like the ocean, you put this there, and now you can see that there's a little bit of sense between these two pieces. So if there's a cut somewhere, you can have something that sets up meaning. So it frames, for example, you know, any of these kind of things set up the meaning. Politically, as I've said before, always is the argument, if you happen to just get into a position of power, wandering around a position of power, land in your head, you know, then usually the task is to get a binary established, a leaders and led, a this versus that. If you have this multiplicity going on, it's very difficult to create something that you can hang on to. Now, I'm putting it this way in this kind of like very slow bleed, as it were, up to this position, because the one thing about meaning is that it identifies a thing called an object. The other thing about meaning is that it says that it can change, and therefore it invokes the notion of the subject. In both cases, because we're talking about this with respect to the deep cut, or what is also understood as the excluded middle. And why is it the excluded middle? Because when you think about the dialectical synthesis, you think everything's on this side, can't be on that side, and everything on that side can't be on this side. That which is in the deep cut, or what some philosophers call the abyssal logics, the abyss, the so-called in-between, is met. What is understood by that is that's where the shift happens. That's where you can actually be creative, in the so-called in-between. Now, what happens if that's not your picture? What happens if there's a way of thinking meaning that does not require the deep cut, and not only does not it require the deep cut, but in invoking the deep cut, it's invoking a very specific kind of, well, not very, I don't mean specific in a singular sense, but a very, let's say, complex, specifically set of ideological and political positions that immediately come into play. So I'm just throwing that out because I want you to kind of hear that, because I wouldn't make the argument that Hegel is, you know, conservative and Kant is radical or something like that. I don't mean it in that sense. I mean once you take the pill, once you realize that you're going to start doing this division like this, a whole lot of Trojan horses come into the picture. Steal from wherever, but always remember you're going to take a bunch of problems with you. So Heidegger, to circle back to this, is suggesting that this is not the approach. He's making the argument that there's, in order to create meaning, you have to understand it like this, as opposed to like this. You have to understand it as a relationship, in this case between being and Dasein, and that relation is in fact what establishes 1, the deep cut, 2, the abyss, 3, the discourse. Now, it's kind of like, how can it be an abyss and a discourse at the same time? So he's got to make a move that allows you to understand when is this not translatable, or to put it slightly differently, again getting back to what Jakob was saying, when the translation is the cut, is the abyss, is the event, is this moment. And for Heidegger stroke Benjamin, they're going to make a very odd move. They're going to start developing this notion of difference, which Derrida picks up as difference. We'll get into that a little later. So rather than having this as the cut like this, you have a relationship. But the odd thing about this relationship is that there's no bottom to it, and there's no top. There's just, in Heidegger's sense, there's just the being and the Dasein that pulls this together and creates this moment that if it collapses, you have void. And if it's too far apart, it won't work either. So there's a specific kind of attraction that's going on here that creates this belonging, as he calls it, this so-called A equals A. And that's what you need to get a sense of. So that's pretty much what we did for the last 4 weeks. That's the summation of the last 4 weeks, A equals A. And again, it's kind of like the New York version of knife in the head. He's like, yes, A equals A. Everybody's like, yes, I understand the law. Okay, well, you understand that the equal sign no longer means on either side, it means attraction. So Lyotard is going to call that pull the great zero. And in fact, in computing, that is the zero. Because it's not about a negative. In computing, that is about artificial intelligence, morphogenesis. You're going to have a different kind of pull going on. So in the old-fashioned form of computing, you had if this, go that way. If that, if not, go this way. But once you start realizing that you have a different algorithm going on, whether or not you're talking in terms of literal algorithms, or you're talking, let's say, it's not metaphoric, but it's a different descriptor of this, a different analytic descriptor, you're going to find that this bit, this belonging bit, is the zero. And what creates the pull become the segments, or the ones. So the relationship between 1 and 0 is a very specific thing that we'll get into after we finish this chapter, this work on difference and difference. But for Heidegger, he's going to start to talk about this scenario as a leap, or as a relation between leaping and this thing called perdurance. Does anybody want to take a stab at where he's going before we open the book with this?
I got really interested in perdurance.
Uh-oh. Does that mean you're going to leave Lacan?
No, I'm not going to talk about Lacan. Just as a suspension, a suspension of things.
Okay.
Circling.
So what is this perdurance? Do you understand it to be?
It's the cut, kind of opened up and held temporary in time.
That's good. So what does this cut look like? So what does that really mean?
So meaning is in flux.
Yes.
During perdurance. Meaning's only fixed if the cut's kind of just a cut. But when the cut opens up into a gap in time and space, meaning can...
Now, is there any difficulty that anyone can see, including yourself, about that sentence? About what you just said, about this fact about the cut opening up, and that perdurance is dealing with this thing, this cut that opens and widens it.
So is it the cut is splitting, or is it, you probably go to Lyotard and talk about invagination?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that a cut simply put like that is...
So in fact the cut is not a cut.
No.
That's...
Did you say imagination?
No, invagination.
Invagination.
Yeah. Kate, a new one, a new problem.
So it's
Is
fold,
it
fold.
with an I or an
It's a
E?
fold.
Oh, it's.
Yeah, these guys. Anyway,
In the endurance is the stand-in of nothingness, which is another way.
Is the what?
As the stand-in of nothingness.
and what does that mean?
I think I understand that. That is in one of the footnotes in Deficit Difference. This endurance is stand-in of nothingness, and I understand it through the next physics in the basic writings, where he talks about everything moving away from the person. This is gives the position of nothingness to the Dasein.
And what would nothingness mean? You're right here. You're on the right track here. What would nothingness? What would nothingness mean to Dasein? What does that mean?
Anxiety, because of the tunement that lies beneath. The nothingness that lies beneath is the abyssal, it's like the abyssal plane that lies beneath, that creates. The nothing creates the attunement, this sense of nothing.
Okay, so let's go back again to this question of the cut. The difficulty with what you're saying was that you're using the C word, the cut word. And you have to be very careful, because in most analytic philosophy or methodology and so on, this notion of the cut is central to being able to establish where the abyssal logics fall, where this can be established. But if you turn it this way, as it were, if you're talking about surfaces, then this perdurance is gonna be used as a way to invest nothing or it's not blankness. It's the not sayable something. So it's not completely nothing. The not sayable something into the picture. Now that's a very different move than what Adorno is using, or what Lacan is using. That's why I was giving you a hard time about that. Because in, certainly in Adorno or in the more sophisticated versions of negation, you have negation as part of the immanent structure of this movement. Or it starts as the no thing, the nowhere, the nothing, and it's put against the something, is synthesized, and then the continuation creates the ground around which meaning is then established, but that around which and the internality of the no thing, the nothing, this becomes the way in which one begins to understand negation. This is not what Heidegger is saying. He's using a word that has to do with length of time, has to do with movement of time, duration, and at the same time, it's simultaneous. So it's this durational instant that puts the game in play. Now, if you remember with, when we talked about, for those of you there in the seminar last year, we talked about this in relation to photography. So I want to make a stab at how perdurance, can you remember, for those of you that might have been there, how perdurance is linked with photography? Old-fashioned photography, I don't mean the digital photography. What do you remember?
Because it's, they had to have longer exposures, so it gives you an instantaneous moment because you're left with a photograph which is, everybody reads it as an instant moment, but there's that duration that's needed in order to create that one moment.
Yeah, right. Yeah, can you repeat that?
With old kind of brown box cameras, you used to have like a longer exposure to allow enough light in to create a photograph, and most people understand a photographic image as an instantaneous moment, because we would just think that it's taken immediately, but there is that time in which the photographic film needs to expose with the light in order to create that one moment.
Understood? Want to repeat that?
There's a Giacomelli photo of the wave.
There's a what?
Giacomelli photo of the wave.
Yeah.
That he just moved the camera following the wave,
Mhm.
and I think that is iconic for this.
So that would be like perdurance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like.
Well, it's weird because that's not like actually capturing endurance. It's not even capturing the moment.
Yeah,
capturing
it's
actual this movement. of
Yes.
the moment.
So it deals with some kind of investment in time and space that's able to create some relationship to, and in fact, Mark was saying, is negation. So that's not quite what geometry is doing there in terms of what at least Mark was saying, because, so let's just clarify before we again open the book. What is nothingness in this context? What does it mean to capture the nothing? How does it work? Want to give it a go, Grace? No? Anybody want to give it a go? Natalia? Sure? You must have physics running around your head.
Yeah, unfortunately, at the moment there are just a lot of things which is
Running around your
mixed.
head.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And
Excellent.
I'm not sure that.
We got to figure out this nothing before we open that book.
What if nothingness is not beyond or is not outside,
Right?
but is, and it sounds like a paradox said in our language, it is the limit of what is.
Okay, good. And what is the limit of is? I feel like what is the story of Oz? What is the limit of is?
Well, the limit of is part of the is. That's what I found out.
Okay, good, good. The limit of is part of the is.
As in, is zero. Because zero is part of the sequence of numbers. It's not.
Is it a part of the sequence of numbers?
But it's not in between numbers.
Okay, so the zero in some cultures, or in some base 10, for example, is between, as it were, 1 and minus 1.
Instead,
I mean, there's some cultures that don't have a 0,
Mhm.
which is very interesting as well. So this 0 that you're talking about could be said to be sitting so-called in between the sort of, heaven and hell, as it were. So the earth is like the 0.
Yeah, but I'm saying that it isn't.
I know.
Yeah.
I just, and why isn't it that? And then if it's not that, then what is it?
Am I allowed to bring somebody else in? Or
Of course.
I was reading Leibniz this
Oh,
week.
okay. And which Leibniz were you reading?
The monadology, and then I started the discourse of metaphysics.
Okay, so which one? Say, because again.
Monadology
Yes.
and the discourse of metaphysics.
Okay.
Which were both, just for the information, written on demand of some aristocrats who had read his own book and wanted further. So they're private commissions.
And if we're not careful, that's where we're heading in
Yeah.
education. You're gonna have the aristocrat. Can you imagine Prince Charles asking you to write on anything?
And what he was working on was a form of calculus that would allow to go in between integers whole numbers. Because whole numbers reflected geometrical shapes which were finite, and he wanted to find a way to compute or calculate infinitesimally. So what happens with that? This is my understanding. I have to read it a few times more before mastering it. What happens with that is that 0 becomes a special instance of the numbers. And in the text, what was coming across was that it was comparing it with physics, motion. So inertia, the static situation, is a special instance of motion. So it is always part of motion. And in this case, I say that the nothing is part of the is. That special instance when is not doing what it's doing here, but is at its limit. And so much of that identity becomes a special instance of two things that, or several things that are not just infinitesimally different. So there is a moment where they really combine, and it's a point, so it's got no dimension.
So it's, okay, so that you moved into a second point. Okay, so the first part of your argument, as I'm hearing it, is that you have this situation where there's always a kind of non-closure to any given integer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is in fact Gödel's argument, G-O-D-E-L, Kurt Gödel, for if you want to get to this century, and where he says that they're undecidable. And that's where that comes from. So if they're undecidable, that's point A, in every whole number, then what you're also saying is that there's this so-called limit to is. So another way of saying that is, okay, let's pretend that the drip of this Coke is the is. Okay, now where's the limit to that? The limit to that is where it ends, really. It could have been anything, you know, but the question is, where does it end? Because if you notice, it's here, it's there, it's there, it's there, it's there, there. So it's a very weird is. So don't think of the is like the Hegelian here, where you can't get out of here. This is like this. Right? So the limit is that there's no point in suggesting that this is can go here, or that if you're part of this is, if you are the is, and you try and get here, it doesn't make sense, because that's where the is. So there's no getting out of the is. It's just that the is kind of spread around. Now, yes?
But the point also means that the is doesn't have an abstract side or a theory, as I was saying before about art. So the is what there is, what one sees is what one gets.
What one sees is what one gets, okay. And that seeing and getting has this bit of this edge stuff happening. Right?
Yes.
Okay, so if I said, what's the is on this thing, you would know immediately that it's all that bit plus the little stuff that's sticking out. So what's this stuff? That's not linked to the is, yes? What is it?
The nothing or the no is?
No, it's not the nothing, because the nothing is part of the is, according to Heidegger. So what's this here? That bit? Pretend it's, you're going to say something? It's ectoplasm. Yeah, I'm sorry, Grace. I just love ectoplasm. It's my favorite new word. So if you were the galaxy, then what would be these things? What could conceivably be these bits, the is bits?
Dark matter.
No, the dark matter would be this bit.
What?
The matter would be this, the stars, the galaxies, which is why you can never get outside of the galaxy, even though it's shaped like this. Because this is, this thing called the is a funny shape. In your mind, you might have the old-fashioned version of the is, which looks like a square or a circle, or anyway, something like that. Whereas in fact, this is the is they're talking about. Now, if that's the case, what's perdurance in this picture? Kate. Oh, were you going to say something?
I was going to say that.
What's perdurance on this? Kate?
Well, I think that's,
oh,
sorry, I think
what?
that's when you say, well, that's an epochal understanding of whatever you're talking about.
Is.
Yeah, is. So that's a semantic choice. It's a game of playing there is from a certain viewpoint. So the standing of nothingness really is outside of that understanding is nothing. It really is a kind of anxiety that is the root. Maybe Nietzschean Dionysian as an undifferentiated mass might be another kind of
could
understanding.
be, it would be.
The way that moves from that into the Apollonian plane, which is not quite as cut.
Let's not
cut.
go to
No.
Nietzsche yet. Sorry. Let's stay with this for just a little bit, because this stuff out here, I understand you to say that it's anxiety.
one's alive, one's dead. The Coke.
Good, okay, that's good. Let's try it again, because now I have more. Another is. Okay, now this is, see, because you can see it better, right? And actually, it looks like it's like the milk is a little off. God.
We have histological understandings set against history, which are an impending, but histological understandings are linear. So I think his understanding.
Who's his?
Heidegger's understanding of history can be an appending. History is not exactly what's current. And what's current is knowledge, modern language, modern understanding.
You got all that out of that. That's fantastic. It's fantastic. No, it's possible. But let's just stay where. Yeah, it's the same thing. Where does the A equal A exist in this? Because this is A equals A.
Superficial tension, fantastic. It's perfect as an image.
Thank you. You can try it. Is there more coffee left?
No, it's
Not on the iPad.
It's super.
What do you call it? The superficial tension of a liquid.
Yeah.
Why does it stay like this? It doesn't spread all over the universe. Which is actually what is used in disinfectant. Is some chemicals that break down superficial tension so you can.
It's like when you have water in a glass, it's this. When you pour the full glass, water actually stands a little bit higher than a glass. There's tension of the water that creates that bubbles. That's what the truth is.
Ooh, we're so close. Really good.
I'm kind of thinking it should like fall down the table.
No.
Yeah, but
No. Let's just try and keep it on this thing. It could fall down the table, but that's because you guys like to be messy. We're going to try and just. This is the is. All of this is A equals A.
So going back to the physics thing, I was shocking at physics, but is it the potential of it, the potential energy of something?
Is what the potential energy?
Or the potential within that, so the potential that this water has is at the top of the glass.
No, that's just a physical attribute of the water. What it does.
Yeah.
Come on, let's stay with A equals A. I know that you don't want to talk about it. It's something about that. Yeah, great.
I was going to say perdurance because it's being held together but also held apart from anything that's not the is.
Yes! Yes, say it again.
So the coffee is an A, but everything that's not the coffee is also the A. So the equal sign is essentially the perdurance of what's holding it together, the belonging, but also holding it apart.
It's very depressing how fast she's gotten in like 1 year, right? Don't worry, you first year people. You will sound like this later. That's good. Excellent. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah.
Does it make sense in terms of your own work?
No.
Okay, that's the next step. Okay, so that's year 3. Okay, go ahead there.
If we put it like that, I mean, it sounds very clear.
But in fact, it's completely.
No. It's a genuine question. I don't want to. I was thinking that perdurance happens as well.
You mean as on the side? So you have the is, and then you also have perdurance.
No. As beside what Grace just described as being held together and apart at the same time, which is probably exactly what I'm going to say, is a relationship between the undetermined infinitive form of being with a capital B and being with a small b, general, the present participle of being in historic time and in space.
Which is kind of what Mark was getting at, yeah.
So that those two, the infinitive and instance of the, so the ontological and the ontic, the relation between the two.
And ontological means, just for
the
those people,
logic of being.
So ontological is the logic of the onto. And what does that mean?
It's the logic of what is supposed to be beyond and behind everything.
Okay, and so what's ontic then?
Ontic is the present or one moment in history and time. It is one instance.
So you're making the argument that little b being and big B being is like ontic ontology.
Yes. I always read in those terms. This is why I was trying to make what Grace just said back to his understanding that where the infinitive doesn't have any real presence, because to have any presence, it should be declined into an ontic form.
Okay. And when you say into an ontic form, you mean?
It should be here and now, the one that can counter
But it is here and now.
Yeah, but it is here and now, as Heidegger says, as the one that constantly conceals itself and moves away. So this relationship, we're trying to grasp something that we know is constantly concealing itself and moving away. And yet, it is absolutely part of our present, is this endurance that creates language, certainly, because it is not fully graspable ever.
Do you think it creates vulnerability as well? Like, why would it
Feeling
create
of
anxiety and not why anxiety and not love, for example? Why doesn't it create love?
I don't know, anxiety is a problem of Heidegger.
Oh, sorry. It's like,
at least that I know
that's
that.
hilarious. Okay. It's his problem. That's right. Yeah, he can't speak for himself.
No, I mean, why anxiety and not love? Well, is anxiety also from the point of view that he is still looking backward, he still looks at all the tradition that placed that on ontological level somewhere. So it was fixed, it guaranteed certainty of knowledge, it guaranteed ground for decision, for future actions, and therefore there was a certain feeling of safety. This is what in 97 they were asking about vulnerability. Why? Yes, one is vulnerable if the ontological level or ground, as I calls it, is constantly withdrawing.
Okay, so I'm going to throw one more thing. So, because you're almost there, with the exception of Grace, who is there and here. So now, not looking at the little blob that Mattia made, because that one doesn't seem to have any spread to it other than its own. Sorry.
Very bad.
Yeah, it needs to make it a little bit. Okay, that's much better. Okay. Okay. Well, see, that doesn't really count, the one that you set down twice. The reason I say that is because in the moment, in the instant of the is, you get a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this pattern is not like the pattern of repetition, as Deleuze will talk about it, where the repetition creates difference. This pattern looks like that. It's a weird pattern. These are the patterns. We can see it creates a pattern in the moment that it happens, and that, boom, that's a pattern. And that pattern creates a belonging. So it has both a belonging and a distancing. Now, Heidegger says in order to get out of this pattern, as it were, what do you have to do? Leap. And how does that happen? How do you leap out of this blob? You get a spaceship. You go into the wormhole.
Well, what it suggests is sort of when one does a 360 degrees leap over oneself.
Often.
And falls in the same position one leaped from.
So you thought that the little wall sits were torture. This is you doing a backflip and ending up in the same spot.
Yes, because what they end up saying, that one ends up realizing in this leap, is precisely that what one had in the first place is what one is. Now, the idea that in your texts that it says that we as humans are for death. Our own historical time is for the only end of ending. And that's our logic.
Okay.
Is to me this leap, where one lets go of a real or external end, or a tangible
Well,
end.
can I leap out of life? My life? Can I leap out of my life?
Well, living side by side, no.
No.
Yeah.
So what's this leap that you can leap out of?
I'm short of repeating. No, again, obviously leap out of metaphysics, leap and let go, all these things that he's saying. But I was trying to understand it.
Maybe I wasn't following you properly. Try it again. Yeah? Voice?
So yes, sorry.
No, go on.
Noise more than voice.
Okay.
No, you say there's a distance between the two, in between the patterns. So I guess leaping that means you have to be in the distance between the pump.
Well, you see, but if you look at this circle thingy here and this one here, they're still part of is.
Yeah.
So that still looks like a normal is. Sorry. Okay,
But my leap out of it takes me to some other semantic understanding, which is that this is a mess and I want to quickly clean it up with an uncultivated OCD. So
that's right. Yes, where are those napkins? In fact, right over there, back there, so don't worry.
But that's where my leap of event of appropriation, which is the leap, leads me to that seeing this as somebody's going to have to pick this up. So no, it's no longer a pattern, it's just a problem.
No, but
It's a leap into negative space.
It's a leap into something, but if the negative is in the is, then it's obviously not into negative space. What did you say? Sorry?
Leap into the event of appropriation.
A
The
leap
event.
into the event of appropriation.
Yeah.
Very
Which
good,
is
Lauren.
authenticity or
Yes.
owned, disowned. So.
Okay, so let's figure out what that leap into the event of appropriation, which sounds like we're just spiraling into like from one semantic bridge to another. Did anybody ever watch? Did you have the cartoons Popeye here? Popeye the Sailor Man.
Sure.
With olive oil, and skinny little olive oil, and so on. Well, you know, there was a time when I always remember this as a child, that olive oil decided to do some sleepwalking, and she was just asleep, and she was walking along one of these cranes, and because she was asleep and she just didn't like picture it, there was another crane, and she just sort of stepped onto the crane, the other crane went here, and then, you know, something like this. So I'm hearing a sleepwalking olive oil with you guys, and not this event of appropriation. It's like, well, it just so happens, you know, it's really like, you know, just amazingly that you end up landing in the ground.
No, it's not that.
Okay.
What I'm thinking of is a game between a possible and the impossibility of infinity.
Okay. Between the possible,
Possible, which is
which is this,
an actual, yes.
which is this is the possible.
And then infinity, which is all the possibilities that are not virtual, are not somewhere else metaphysically, is just open-ended. And the relation between the two is the space of endurance.
So how does that create meaning? It's not
No,
space of
okay.
endurance. That's very important.
No, okay.
It's what Grace was talking about, is the space. Can you repeat the space of endurance again?
It's the holding together and apart of what makes the coffee and the table separate. I'm not explaining that well.
Okay, no, it's not the coffee and the table, it's the
Yeah.
bits.
The is and everything that's not these.
Right, now, can you see the difference in what?
Yes, but I think that there either I don't agree with Heidegger or don't agree with the coffee drop. More like, because Heidegger puts two very specific terms in relation.
Mm-hmm.
Small b being a moment in time and space, and big B being, which is outside time and space.
Mm-hmm.
And the relation of the two creates dimension. It's the event of sense.
Right,
You know, it's a flash and we have the world.
yeah.
But the big B being the infinitive is the complete lack of determination.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's not essence as it would have been described before.
Yes.
Beforehand. So this relation is what I define between the actual possible on one side and the infinity on the other. I mean, it's, in this space there is angst that Mark brought up.
No
So-
love.
No, not love, no. But I might have got it wrong.
No, that's not wrong. It's different than what you said before. Dane, you want to give it a go?
Well, I was thinking about I think about endurance as a standing significantness as well, but I think about the standing requires a sort of a ground
To stand?
yeah, a groundless ground, I guess, would be how I think endurance, yes.
A groundless ground. Yes, and why is it a groundless ground?
Because there's not a ground to support. The nothingness always will be a somethingness, I guess.
Yeah. Want to say that again? Why is it not a ground?
Because if it was a ground, it would have a somethingness to it, and it wouldn't be a nothingness. be, but it would go back inside to where we were before.
Okay, is this painting?
It certainly can be.
And what can it certainly be?
Because it's able to capture something, yeah, I'd say between a sort of movement and a moment, but it's something that's not taken into as a something.
Okay, we're getting so warm, really warm. So let me just throw in, just so you've heard it, but we did this again last year. When we looked at Lyotard's discourse figure, one of the things that he argues, and it follows this argument around painting, is that painting isn't, as any art, isn't particularly about the medium. It's about this relation between the figural and the discursive. Now, I say that because there is something going on here that you need to think about these relations, and we're getting there, torn away from either dimension or moment or time or movement or essence. You're thinking about something that actually coheres, but not in a way that is translatable.
Singularity.
Yes. And what does that mean then, to say that? That's correct.
Well, it doesn't, you're not claiming an identity for it.
Identity can't be claimed for it. So it's not about intention, I want to claim, I don't want to claim.
Oh, well, but precisely where somebody else might say that I want to sort of say that pattern is identity, has an
identity, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would be arguing that's a singularity.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so the person claiming that's an identity would be claiming this the representation, whereas the singularity, so they would be claiming the representation of sort of is in that sense, whereas like the singularity would be the event that's is still happening in the years, even though that's now still. So the event wasn't just the pouring in all its complexity, it's the event of that just as it is.
As remaining.
Yeah.
What was the tricky word, remaining?
Yeah, remaining is perhaps like, no, remaining make almost sort of sound like
excess.
It, like it's actually what's unfolding rather than remaining.
Okay, we're getting warm. I think it's time to open the book, because I think that we have to now put some of this. Does everybody have access to identity and difference? Book, yes. Just open a book, any book will do. Take a book.
We do different one.
Of course.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Right, so would you add that? Yeah.
Oh, I've got
you've got that. Yeah.
Sorry. I'll take one.
Yeah. Does everybody have ability to look at this? Okay. Right. Okay. Good. Okay. Right. Okay. If you go to, where are we? You don't have it?
Oh, no, we did. Just load.
Okay. Everybody has a way to look at this, right? Okay. Okay, I think it's going to be here. I'm sure I have it. Right, okay, so if we go to page, okay, that's still not right. Okay, yeah, page 58. You want to take a read of this?
Yep.
So if you can read from here to down here.
Okay.
Okay, from metaphysics,
How do I pronounce the Greek?
logos.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For metaphysics.
Yeah.
Yes. Metaphysics thinks of beings as such, that is in general.
Okay,
Metaphysics.
so slowly. Did everybody get that? Did everybody understand that sentence? Did you hear that sentence? Say it again.
Metaphysics thinks of beings as such, that
Okay,
is
so what does that mean?
in general.
So what does it mean to think of being as such? Like, can we say that this is being because it's there? That's being, right? So that's as such, okay?
Metaphysics thinks of beings as such, as a whole. Metaphysics thinks of the being of beings both in the ground giving unity of what is most general, what is indifferently valid everywhere, and also in the unity of the all that accounts for the ground, that is, of the all highest.
Now, does that make sense?
Yes, Aristotle.
Yes, and what is he saying with
He's
Aristotle?
talking about the being of beings, which is gets translated out as the divine or physics, essentially, and the being of beings, which is the way we, or the way beings conduct themselves, carry on.
Good, and where in Aristotle, do you remember?
In metaphysics.
Okay.
The metaphysics.
The being of beings is thus thought of in advance as the grounding ground.
So, that makes sense? Everybody's like, ah! So, you have this thing called the being as such, that blob. That becomes the way in which one takes it as the object and the subject, the point of departure for where you're going to go, as such. That's what as such means. You have this thing, and you take it as the given, as the thing that's sitting there, okay?
Therefore, all metaphysics is at bottom and from the ground up what grounds, what gives account of the ground, what is called to account by the ground, and finally what calls the ground to account.
Okay, translation, anybody? Are you leaving?
No.
Translation?
Well, it's everything. It's at the bottom, yeah, because it does all the jobs.
It does all the jobs. It's a really.
It is at the bottom and from the ground up.
Yes.
So it is.
It's the base.
The base, but also all the structure coming from the ground up, is what is called to account by the ground, so cause or the necessity of the ground, and finally what calls the ground to account, so the end, the telos. So
Good.
it somehow envelopes
Yeah.
everything that is
So
there.
it's not going to be. So Heidegger is not going to go into the 360-degree backward flip.
Not here, did it in the previous
Life.
No, in the previous text, in the difference, this is the flip, the leap out of metaphysics is to come out of these. It's a completely different set of dimensions.
It's a different type of
It's a
going
set of
back
dimensions,
around.
yeah.
Okay, that's what we're going to get.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so go on.
Why do we mention this? So that we may experience the shop-worn terms ontology, theology, ontotheology in their true gravity. At first and commonly, the terms ontology and theology do, of course, look like other familiar terms.
Right. Just everyday dinner discussion. Yes. Okay.
Psychology, biology, cosmology, archaeology. The last syllable, logi, means broadly and usually that we are dealing with the science of the soul, of living things, of the cosmos, of ancient things. But logi hides more than just the logical in the sense of what is consistent and generally in the nature of the statement, what structures, moves, secures and communicates all scientific knowledge. In each case, the logia is the totality of a nexus of grounds accounted for, within which nexus the objects of the sciences are represented in respect of their ground, that is, are conceived.
Okay. Can you translate that?
I'm not good at reading and thinking at the same time.
With that chewing gum and walking problem.
Yeah,
Anyway, Jakob, you just looked up at the very wrong moment. Alberto, you want to give it a go?
No, thanks.
That's good. Grace? Nope. Kate? Want to give it a go? Wow.
Sorry. Trying to get my head around it.
talking about that, saying the logic and design. Logia.
A little bit louder. Even I can't hear you.
Logia!
That's right.
Logia is wrong. It's looking at the totality of nexus of grounds accounted for. So it's not separate. It's like all those tabs are not different objects. They're one object. Are they? So they're
Good.
singular. So
There's not a singularity. They're not a singularity.
No.
No, but they are terms
Yeah.
that can be sort of interchanged in a certain sense. And why can they be interchanged? What do they imply with each term?
So this logia seems like a belonging together.
Yeah, they belong together, so they form a platform, which we would call the ground, which, you know, when you say that something's grounded, you mean that it makes sense, or you feel whole, right? These are all expressions that come from this kind of thing. Understanding. It's, quote, makes sense, by which you're not saying it's actually literally producing sense. You're saying, I understand it. I can, quote, see what you mean. I see what you're saying, this kind of thing. So he's saying here, in each case, the logia is the totality of all these grounds within which the nexus of the objects of the sciences are represented in respect of their various grounds. So psychology, biology, blah, 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 you know, that he went through before. Now, that is to say then that the object of the subject gets its nuance already, gets its difference, biology, psychology, sociology, ology, blah, 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 ontology, and so on, all the ologies that we're talking about, they get their differentiation precisely because you start with the ground and it goes in a kind of different path. And that's what makes it different. It's an overarching logia, it's an overarching logic that already sort of takes, as not so much takes as a given, that's probably too broad, but says, here's what I'm arguing, and here's the jumping off point. We come and we explain it this way, we end up with psychology. We explain it this way, we end up with physiology, biology, something like that. Okay, so now what happens?
Ontology, however, and theology are logies, inasmuch as they provide the ground of beings as such and account for them within the whole.
Okay, what does it mean? Am I going too slow here, or going too fast? Lauren?
I'm just ending it. Okay, so I had not remembered Heidegger, so I'm just kind of re-registering.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm finding it difficult to keep up.
Is this just too tough right now? Are people like, is it,
I mean, it's to do with his whole thing about pre-rational, isn't it? Is that too simple way of putting it? There's a limit to all these things. They're limiting in their very nature.
of the things beforehand, but he says the difference between, let's say, physiology, psychology, sociology, and the word ontology and theology play very different games. Theology and ontology do something that's very different than physiology and biology. In the latter case, physiology, biology, he's saying that those create a difference depending on how the combination of the platform allows you to proceed. Something that's called ontology or theology, its platform is made already outside itself because it's making the platform of being. But he's saying that's still a problem. So, to put this slightly differently, so you can maybe hear it, I'm still thinking about the painting, and I'm thinking about Samira's work, actually. You know, with your, those kind of like blob things that you have on there, you know, the gray. Do you have them on your pad that you can show us? Yes, right. Perfect, go find them. Okay. Are we going to be able to see them? Okay. So on these things that Samira's going to show you, you would say that the sort of ontological feature of the painting that she's doing. I'll never get to this. Come on, Sarah. It's a cue. Creates the meaning of what is happening in this painting. Good. Got it. Okay, make it big. It's just not going to make big, is it? Now it's gone away. Okay. See, what happened to your paintings? You're supposed to bring one down here. Like, you know.
Or too big for you.
No, we
I'm
can
trying to make some smaller.
make something so it fits over here or something, so we can make something that matches the couch. While you, oh, there you go. So it's not going to go large. So just pass it around. Okay. These, you would describe your work with like different layers and sort of different textures and so on and so forth, and yet it's not different. The point isn't that there are different textures and different layers and so on. The different layers and textures create what it is, right? It's not like you have a blob over here and a blob over there and then that's going to mean something. It doesn't mean anything, but it doesn't mean nothing. It just is. So that just is the ground, is what Heidegger is referring here as the ontic. That form of the is very different than the biology, the psychology, the disciplines. You're not disciplining right now. What you're doing is you're forming an is. And that has a logic to it. And that's why it works, by the way. It doesn't work just because you decided, oh, that's what I was going to. It works because there's an actual logic that's going on. It's just not a logic that is the Aristotelian logic. It's a very different form of a logic, and this is what he's getting at. Try again. So we got ontology.
Go from there.
Yeah.
Ontology, however, and theology are logies, inasmuch as they provide...
Wait, before you get to the word beings, can you change that to the word is? Oops.
Inasmuch as... I'll
Yeah.
start. Ontology, however, and theology are logies, inasmuch as they provide the ground of is, as such, and account for them within the whole.
The whole of is. Okay, keep going.
They account for being as the ground of... Is this?
Of is.
Is.
Or
it is, sorry.
Plural is.
Yeah.
Okay.
They account for the logos and are in an essential sense in accord with the logos.
Isn't it exciting how you're learning Greek? At least you know one word in Greek, for those of you that don't know Greek. Yeah.
That is, they are the logic of the logos. Thus,
So what is the logic of the logos? What's the they that's the logic of the logos? What's the they that accounts for the logos?
Ontology. Is it metaphysics?
No, not metaphysics. The logis.
Oh,
Good.
theology.
So there is a, quote, kind of ground, but it's the kind of ground that is itself. But it's not the Hegelian in itself or for itself, any of those kind of itselfs. It's just the whole of the is. And that forms the jumping off point. And the jumping off point is the leap.
Sorry, can you
So they form the ground of the is. Or the is forms the ground. But the is isn't a ground you can stand on. It just is this thing that has different particles to it. But to talk like that ends up bringing you back to an Aristotelian logic. To understand the particles as these kind of, that's drawings, those little ones, drawing, my God. Okay, these bits that are sticking out, they're all part of the is. They're not separate from the is. They just look separate, but to talk about that logically, but the logis that are involved here create this thick form of an is.
So, since you were referring to Hegel, that famous sentence, all that there is and all that there isn't,
Taken together the form of.
it is retaken here as a distribution of the is.
Yes. Good. And that distribution of the is gives it a thickness. But it's a thickness that isn't based on anything. You could say, or to the degree that it's based on something, the something it's based on is the is. So I won't tell you anything. It just is what it is. But you can see whether or not it works or doesn't work, whatever that means, if there's a logic that can do that. So atonal music, for example, works not because it eventually has some sort of pattern that if you stood outside of it for a while, or you were like way back and listened to this thing for like 75 hours, you'd see some sort of pattern. That's not what creates the meaning. What's creating it is the way in which this environment, this is, starts to create pluralities of itself to create itself. That's the belonging. That's how the identity establishes. And identity means that it makes sense. But it doesn't make sense at the level of being coherent, and you now can talk at dinner parties and be, everybody wouldn't, they would nod sagely and understand. No, it doesn't make sense at that level. It makes sense in the sense it's coherent. And that's why a piece of art works if it can do that. What?
If it can create the is.
If it can create an is that allows for breathing and movement and this kind of odd spatiality.
Would it be the same, I'm thinking of a dramatic rather than a painterly one, if somebody was underneath a blanket and you couldn't see them?
I don't know.
Would that
Can
be,
you-
would that be pejorance and is like the is, the coffee is? Because it's not identifiable, it's not figurative.
Well, I mean, what I can think that maybe it means like an effect. Like, because in the performative, in performance, in theater, let's say, part of the way something can work is that the effects create the is. So if the person's on a blanket or doing upside down things or whatever they're doing to themselves, that's not the point. It's an ingredient. And of course that is in fact what our good person, Jacqueline, is arguing right now as we speak. That's why she's saying that's what painting is. She wouldn't, it has performance in it. And it could be that the theater is performing a painting. It is painting. It could be argued that way. But what sets it like that is the very fact that it can create this kind of thickness, this dimensionality of nothing, of presence. Now, the thing about identity in this example is that it coheres, it belongs, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense beyond that, okay? Like, you could say that it works, like you would say that Samira's paintings are working, they are not crap, people might not understand them, but it's not actually about understanding, it's about whatever it is. So the question is, why would Samira's work go into a gallery or whatever? I mean, I don't mean a gallery, why would it make sense that that would be considered art? Whereas if I tried something like that, I can assure you, it would not look quite as good. Maybe I don't have the patience for it, I don't know. But there's something about what you're doing that enables this thing called art to happen, right? Don't you think? Nod, yes. Okay, Samira slides under the table. Okay, whereas not all blobs on paper is going to work. Now, having said that, Heidegger wants to go further. Okay, so let's see what happens. Because there's going to be something that he's going to say about, okay, it's all well and good to be understanding that as long as we're on the same page with everybody at that, so you understand that the is and this thing called the nothing that makes up the is at the one hand nothing because it has no body, as it were. On the other hand, it creates a presence. In fact, it is present. It is presence. It's present and it's presence. But its presence stroke present has a thickness. And maybe this is ectoplasm. You knew I was going to say this. Yeah, that's my favorite ectoplasm. That one. That's the best so far. Although the one that you have of that woman with coming out of her nose is really getting to be my favorite. Everyone will see it when you see the journal. Anyway, go on. Yes.
Thus, they are more precisely called ontologic and theologic. More rigorously and clearly thought out, metaphysics is ontotheologic.
Okay. Go to the next step. Yes.
We now understand the networks.
We now understand it all.
We now understand the name logic in the essential sense, which includes also the title used by Hegel, and only thus explains it as the name for that kind of thinking which everywhere provides and accounts for the ground of beings as such within the whole in terms of being as the ground, in brackets, logos. The fundamental character of metaphysics is ontotheologic. We should now be in a position to explain how the deity enters into philosophy.
Okay. Do you?
What is in brackets, sorry?
Logos.
Logos.
That little upside down thing is lambda. That little V that's upside down is a lambda. So it's low, and that thing that looks like a Y is a G. Logos.
So can one say that the logic of the is served as in something that doesn't belong to any parts, that doesn't reflect anything outside, but is the being together of all parts?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a peculiar form of synthesis.
Mm-hmm. Because you wouldn't really say that this is synthesized, but it is together.
Yeah, this is why I say peculiar form of synthesis.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not synthesized as in I've got some number of ingredients which added in some specific way will produce a specific result.
Right.
But it is articulated in such a way as to have its specific dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it is a synthesis. But it is recognized as synthesis only retroactively.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yes? Nobody else understands it. Okay, now that's where we're getting God into the picture. Now the question I throw to you, we're not going to spend a lot of time with God. I mean, you know what I mean. But just to get a sense of the fact that this is where in speculative realism and object-oriented philosophy, one starts to bring in the question of consciousness as a deity. So you know, we're just plug, so you get that side. Now we're just going to skip ahead because I want to make a suggestion after we finally get through groundless grounds to look at speculative realism. Unless you guys don't want to do that, unless you have some other, or we just get to mathematics. Okay, so now we're going to skip the being of beings. I want to get to. What page is Perdurance on? Does anybody know? Maybe it's before this. Okay, here we go. All right, now, so forget about Perdurance for the moment. All right, so we have this thing that we're going to call is, and God comes into the picture because there's a certain way of grounding the thickness and the image and so on. And still it is not yet understandable. So Heidegger wants to bring in the question of difference to this picture. Would you feel like still continuing reading? Do you want some else?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, right.
Everybody's
Is everybody okay with Stuart's voice today?
monotone.
Okay. Okay, so now what he's going to do is begin to talk about this notion of being, capital B being, Dasein being, as an entry point to the question of difference. But of course, it's not enough to do it that way, because Dasein is never in and of itself. So Dasein doesn't mean God. This whole belonging creates the deity, the spiritual, this thing that can't be named, there's some sort of intentionality that gets put into this. So there's something that's going on, which we'll just hover for the moment. We'll let it hover. Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah.
And if you could just go down to here.
Thus we think of... Sorry.
What?
It was
Oh, yes, you guessed.
62.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry.
I have to keep that when I know what paragraph.
It's all hard anyway, but that makes it doubly hard, yeah.
Thus we think of being rigorously only when we think of it in its differences with beings. And
Okay, slow. Let's do it again.
Thus we think of being rigorously only when we think of it in its difference with beings, and of beings in their difference with being.
Okay, what does that mean? Can I give it a go?
Okay.
Okay, back up.
Oh no. No, okay. Sorry. Change my mind.
Okay.
Okay, so it's big being.
Yeah.
And we can only think of it because we have small big being, so we only can
Yes. Good,
by
good.
how they establish the difference, so we can only look at it.
Okay, so
by
part
that.
of the difference is established by the fact that they're not,
One.
they're linked together,
Yes,
but they're not melted together.
Yes, so they are together.
Okay, so we already know that in the is, difference is sitting there
Yes.
by virtue of the fact that it's not collapsed upon itself.
It is. And of being. Yes, and a small being in the difference with being, so that's basically the same. Other way around.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Can you say it again?
So.
Can you say it louder so that
I
Kate
could
can hear it
try.
on the other
Okay.
end?
So we can only think of a design being only when we establish a difference with a small big being. So we see that difference. So they are together but apart.
Mhm.
And we can only think of a small big being. So now as big being only when we look at how the difference is established, or identity that is established between small big being and design. Yeah.
Design.
Design.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so we
I'm
got
putting
that so
design
far.
here and here, but design is.
Well,
endpoint.
Dasein is, yeah, it's not an endpoint.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not a goalpost.
So the difference is very important.
Okay, so here, well, that was a good jump there. Thus we think of being rigorously only when we think of it in its difference with beings, and of beings in their difference with being. The difference thus comes specifically into view, right? So that's exactly what Jakob has just described.
It's
Well
a
done.
very chunky way.
No, did people understand it now that Jakob has translated? Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Good.
If we try to form a representational idea of it, we will at once be misled into conceiving of difference as a relation which our representing has added to being and to beings.
So he just shot down Jakob's explanation.
It's but in a lovely way.
Yes, that's
I'm
right.
not offended.
That's right. No. Yes. So he's saying that when one understands this relation between being and Dasein, or little entity being and big B being, when you understand it and you're thinking to yourself, you have these equal signs, so they're apart, but they're also belongings, which he spent the first 60 pages setting up. Then he says that's very interesting, but it's completely wrong. Because if you do that, you're invoking representational thinking. What is representational thinking, and why is it considered the bad news bear of the 21st century? What is the problem with representational thinking?
Theological.
It's what?
It's theological.
It's theological, yes. But why is it theological?
Relies on idealism.
Yes. But why? How does it do that?
And well, it claims identity.
And how does it claim identity? Lauren runs screaming from the room.
Of course it.
Okay.
Is it by referencing always to something else?
Yes.
Is it to put it into a context that there's always...
So the presentation gets represented or
yeah.
represented, and eventually that thing that's being presented drops out, and all you have is the residue, as it were, of that which is, in order to talk about it. And that's representation.
Yeah.
So making it closed.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's just
creating
people
very
sorry.
specific kinds of limits.
Yeah.
These limits are not these limits, which he spent a couple pages trying to explain. This is a different form of how something forms its boundaries, because the boundary is very odd. It's not stuck together and dried. Okay. Go on.
Thus, the difference is reduced to a distinction, something made up by our understanding, Verstand. But if we assume that the difference is a contribution made by our representational thinking, the question arises, a contribution to what? One answers, to beings. Good. But what does that mean?
Obviously he's talking to himself at this point. Yeah.
But what does that mean, beings? What else could it mean than something that is? Thus we give to the supposed contribution the representational idea of difference, a place within being. But being itself says, being which is beings.
Okay, go up again. Let's start again. You're right, you're reading it quite well. When you see the word being, just use the word is.
Okay.
For the time being. Okay, go on.
Do you want me to start?
Get to with Bud.
But if we assume that the difference is a contribution made by our representational thinking, the question arises, a contribution to what? One answers to is. Good. But what does that mean, is? What else could it mean than something that is? Thus we give to the supposed contribution the representational idea of difference, a place within being.
Okay, now just stop for a second. So this is a criticism of the notion of the abyss, the notion of the deep cut. Because he's making the argument that if you start with the no thing, with a nothing, which is internalized, as it were, into the concept, in this case, of the universal, you will end up taking the argument that, how does he say it, that you end up with the notion that being has within it this thing nothing, and in order then to make it, that nothing becomes the word for difference. So difference, and especially when we're talking about queer, different forms of, diversity, these kind of terms that we're so used to, usually being a woman put in terms of this thing called the in-between, or the abyss, or the that which doesn't fit in, that group, that kind of way of looking at this, the Jew, this kind of thing. What he's saying here is that you can't put it like that, because it's not about the nothingness that's within this thing called being itself. It makes a mockery then of the word difference. Difference here then becomes something, difference actually then becomes something that is just the same but different. It's an old American expression.
There was that thing on the news about Germany being able to register on the birth certificate or something, choosing determinate gender. I don't know if it's gone through.
What's this now?
I heard it on the news. I thought it was quite interesting. That you could register your baby as indeterminate sex, and you don't have to register it as.
But they have it in Australia already.
Probably.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
I think they do.
Huh.
So you can male, female, when baby is born, male, female are just indeterminate. So they don't put this basically sex on the baby as a document. It's not this still. This is later.
So that's exactly what he's saying you shouldn't be doing. Because the non-determinant, which is then understood as being different, is not really different. That's still representational thinking.
Non-determinate, indeterminate.
But it's not
Isn't that the
indeterminate.
same?
No.
Isn't that different? Indeterminate is not the same as non-determined. I suppose it is, yeah.
No, because first of all, with a child, it is determinate. I mean, in the sense that what isn't determinate is the ideology that goes with the expression male and female, male or female. that's what's becoming non-determinable. But even there, the choice is to say, well, it's in between, or it's in the not. It's indeterminate, it's not determinate. And he's saying that that is not a form of difference. That's simply recreating representation. Now, it's Heidegger. So he is going to be slightly apolitical, or anti-political even, because that move is clearly a very political move, and it addresses certain issues.
But then this is also the point that the postmoderns turn into the order of.
Right, can you explain that?
The order of language, the order of logos and as a main ideology of thought, which Hegel criticizes Heidegger for. Art as the order of rationality. The reason why it is distribution where there is a mainstream logic and everything else outside is bundled up together as its order, so it's hierarchically lower because it doesn't have a position of its own.
Right.
It's only in relation to a form of ease, which is very, very specific.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Say it again, because I'm not sure if everybody got this. Speak, even though you're going to speak in another.
This description that is given now, the occurs to me, is the root of that move that happens then with postmodernism and a lot of linguistic terms that sets up a number of things as the order of language or the order of any position that has the privilege of being at the center and therefore organizing the surrounding. And one of the things that to me is most important is that there is a plurality of things that is considered order, but they all bundle them together in opposition, or at least as different from one thing only. So the one thing only is really hierarchically more important, more important than the rest.
Got it? Or people like lost the will to live now? We have one more difference. Say it one more time. Sorry.
No,
I'm not convinced everybody has it.
If sexuality, since we were talking about it, is posed as binary, male or female, and there are these two genders, then everything that doesn't comply with this distribution is order.
Is other, yeah.
If
I meant indeterminate in the sense of open. If something is indeterminate, it's not closed. So it could be, it can become
whatever.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean it's going to become male or woman. So I thought that was positive. Category.
What Heidegger is saying is that is still representational thinking.
Yeah.
Try it again. You have to convince Lauren before we have
And I also see what Lauren is aiming at, and I think she has a point in it. I mean, the openness that you mentioned is precisely what setting up an otherness forecloses.
Yeah, it has a capacity. I suppose it's like so if it's not like another binary. It's like claiming a capacity for otherness. Isn't it?
Claiming capacity to become at ease, not related to other forms of ease, which have been placed as the only option of ease, which is what we've been reading about Wittgenstein and Heidegger before last weeks, where the relationship name-object is the proper noun, name, the proper noun, and is the only relationship that can be allowed.
What were you going to say, Grace? That's
I
right.
was going to, you just said it comes down to the naming of it. So Heidegger's criticising that you shouldn't, the other is still a naming of something. So really he's saying that the is the non-nameable, like you can't name the is, and that's why it makes something work, but it's not representational because you can't name it as something.
Yes. Great. That's excellent. Okay, that's exactly right. Okay, so now, oops, sorry. So
it's not quite the same. It's just like if you had something, if the options were
Lauren's going to take your position.
Well, I just thought it's like your positive step, kind of like because it wasn't like male, female, or other. It was indeterminate. It's a bit more precise to sort of get them towards sort of like this capacity for difference, or you might be indeterminate forever.
But why call it indeterminate? Why not call it whatever?
No, I think it's
whatever could be.
They are avoiding the problem.
Yes.
It's not a man, it's not
yeah,
they are avoiding
that.
So it's not that way to solve the problem.
Well, I had a
the problem
colleague.
is in the the people mind is not in the name or the label. It's
Yes.
the culture. It's the way other people look at the children if they are is not the same, or it's supposed to be like, you know, it's not the label the problem.
It's not the same as actually removing the sexuality from the papers at all, because that would actually serve the purpose
Yeah.
as much as what we're trying to, like, especially the queer tries to do as a movement. And if you remove completely sex out of the moment of birth of the child, it's a boy, it's a girl, if you remove that, then it actually starts to do something else. So in the society, within the society, they will start something else. But if you just put a third option, basically, or fourth option, fifth option, there's still going to be options. There's not, as much as it's not, it's actually from the kind of, it's good that there is something, that there is an option, and it's good that there is an option, but it's not really creating any, like, grounded, like, groundless, you know,
Mhm.
grounded things. It's still going to be the same thing, it's the third option now.
I suppose like
Which is still going to be looked at, kind of from social, it's going to be looked at the joke, because who's going to give baby no sex?
Well, I mean, as a matter of fact, I had a colleague of mine who's male, whose partner, female, gave birth, and they decided not to name the child. They thought that was patriarchal and capitalist. And this child went without a name until the child was about, I think about 8 months old, which is quite a long time to go without a name. And they found the child was so confused because they didn't know how to call it. You know, child, come here. And that became the name. And so it became almost an insulting name that they realized that he was beginning to not have a name. He was getting to a position where without a name he was considered a nobody. And that was definitely an interesting problem, which they hadn't thought about. You know, they just thought, you know, the name problem, which is kind of unfortunate.
We didn't talk about it right now.
A small detail. Hadn't thought about it. But I think that what Heidegger is saying here is that is the same kind of problem as saying that it's indeterminate. That in a society that requires some kind of way, that not requires some way of determining the sex as meaning the genitalia of a child and then naming it on a piece of paper and calling it male, calling it female. To say that it's indeterminate, it brings up another form of representation, even though it does in fact get away from the problem inherent in sexism, whether or not it's calling somebody male, calling it female, calling the person female. He's saying it's still the same problem. We haven't gotten out of that problem. That's now, this was a position that Foucault took. He took it pretty much from this view. So his argument was it was ridiculous to have a gay movement or the women's movement or any of these kind of identity movements. That it, you know, and like I said before, when we finally convinced him to go on a gay pride march, he was practically like, no, it's like reactionary and, you know, blah, 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 you know, it's representational and so on and so forth. It's like, well, actually, it might be representational, but, you know, you're going to get arrested. And if we go on this march, there'll be like 15 people, including hot dog sellers and the police. And there were a couple people with bags on their heads, so they want to be seen as being gay. And that was gay pride. That was the gay pride of 1983. Now how it's changed, you know, and now they dropped the word gay out of pride, which I find totally bizarre. But anyway, be that as it may, his point logically was consistent with this argument, but politically it was problematic, as you can see. So I'm asking you to skate with this a little bit, to see where it's taking you, because yes? No, go on.
I find myself constantly in this now position with the work I make as an artist, because if I drop even contrasting representation or whatever is the problem I'm not interested in dealing with, and I am going where I am more interested to work on, then there are no references for most people, and it is not even seen as art. And okay, then I end up working for myself and for a few more. but I'm entirely out of the system because I don't engage with the existing order that is in place.
Mm-hmm. So we must help Mattia. Mm-hmm. Now, in the kind of works that end up having a coherence, even though they're not interpretable, then they would still be recognizable, let's say, recognizable as art. But in the things you're talking about, because do you have any images of your work?
No.
I think.
No, but it's in other words, I'm thinking of the example you brought of Foucault. There is, logically one can leap out. It almost seems, and I don't want to say that we are condemnatory, that historically one has to move in steps. Because otherwise one, it always comes back with the history of madness, or normality is manufactured. But if you are the one that doesn't belong to the existing order, you're mad. You are put into the position of mad, whether or not you feel mad.
And whether or not you are mad.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And this is, of course, Deleuze and Guattari's argument in Capitalism, Schizophrenia, and in fact the whole obsession around the word schizophrenia, because they're using it as a marker to speak about the other so that you can talk about the freedom of difference. But unfortunately, according to this argument, it's just reinventing representation. So it's a problem. So we're almost, is everybody okay with this? You look very exhausted. Is it because everybody has colds? Is there suffering? Okay.
I was just wondering for my pen's worth here.
Yeah.
When you're in the museum, and the museum or some museum, you're looking at sort of artifacts that have come from a long time ago that have lost their original meaning and understanding. They've become almost aesthetic objects. That's what I can see. That's not really naming, is there? Having an aesthetic experience. So there's a kind of a leap out of certain kind of representation to another mixed bag of representation, non-representation.
I mean, that's exactly right, and that's exactly what Heidegger is going to call art. So this, or the poetic, this thing called the so-called work of art is literally understanding how you leap in this way, and therefore reinvest it with an aesthetic experience.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly right. So, can you read this? We get down to Grimm's Fairy Tale and the Hedgehog. We're like slowly but surely getting through this.
Whenever we come to the place to which we were supposedly first bringing difference along as an alleged contribution.
See, he's already mad.
We always
alleged contribution.
We always find that being and it
is.
No, sorry, is. Being and is in their difference are already there.
I'll try that again.
Whenever we come to the place to which we were supposedly first bringing difference along as an alleged contribution, we always find that being and is in their difference are already there. It is, as in Grimm's fairy tale, the hedgehog and the hare, I'm here already.
No one, of course, knows what this is. Yeah. Kate?
Everyone says this about Heidegger all the time, always already. It's like a catchphrase for Heidegger.
I know, it's irritating, isn't it? It's not just for Heidegger. When I was doing my PhD, every lecture you go to had always already. You just wanted to shoot people.
But the minute someone says it, you know they're Heideggerian.
Well, not necessarily. They could also be Marxist.
Okay.
Because it's talking about this way in which the being here now doesn't have a first beginning. So you could read that sentence as to say that it's always already means that where you start where you are. That's where the beginning is. There's no God, there's no outside point, you can't get outside of the is. That's where you start. So it's always already there or here. Okay, so that's what's being said, in some sense. So it's also a way in which metaphysics both brought in God and didn't have God outside directing the events, like a big theater director type thing, that kind of thing. So it's not always Heideggerian. It is the fact that Heidegger made a lot of mileage with that expression, but he's doing it in a way that's partially attacking metaphysics. Okay, yes?
There was, with the same instance of an example of the always already was the idea of the original paradise account of the Peter being always already lost.
Yeah.
As a condition dependent on what
Yeah, that's right.
So, we return here, but
Do you remember where Benjamin says this?
I believe in the Angelus Novus.
In the yeah.
In one of the says of the Angelus Novus. But this
The
is
Angelus Novus, in case you didn't hear
is what I was meaning about
Okay.
360 degree
Yeah.
backward.
Well, this is actually in his thesis on history, where he, well, part of it is where he starts talking about, this is number 19 or whatever it is, where the angel of history is looking back, and in that way we understand progress. Do you remember this? I can't
Yeah, no,
remember
I
exactly.
meant that this here already is the leap outside of metaphysics when one finds itself exactly the same point, a different point of view.
Yeah, yeah. So getting back to Kate's point, there are certain forms of metaphysics, in fact, all of metaphysics, that says always already, because the is where you start. There's not a God outside that you start, that organizes, as it were. But he's taking that and saying the always already there is that, this form of there, is this, you know, a kind of lumpy thickness form. Okay. Keep going, and then I want to get to this book, because we're almost out of time.
Now, it would be possible to deal with this strange state of affairs, that being and is are always found to be already there by virtue of and within the difference. In a crude manner,
In a crude manner.
in a crude manner, and explain it as follows. Our representational thinking just happens to be so structured and constituted that it will always, so to speak, over its own head and out of its own head, insert the difference ahead of time between is and being. Much might be said, and much more might be asked about this seemingly convincing but also rashly given explanation. First of all...
Sorry, like I said, you know, now I'm finding Heidegger hilarious. That's really a bad sign. You have to admit, he's getting annoyed. So, you know, he's, you know, he can't believe that people are now going to get into the question of the in-between. Okay, go on.
First of all...
Can you start again? Sorry, I didn't mean to look backward.
It's like we were reading different books.
Yeah, I'm like laughing. Oh.
Much might be said and much more might be asked about this seemingly convincing but also rashly given explanation. And first of all, we might ask, where does the between come from, into which the difference is, so to speak, to be inserted?
See, criticism. Is that good? Okay, we're on signature. Okay, keep going.
We should discard all views and explanations.
Because why be bothered by that?
And instead note the following. This thing that is called difference, we encounter it everywhere and always in the matter of thinking. In is as such. In is as
in
such.
being.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was thinking there was a letter missing there, isn't there? There was not. No.
Yeah, the matter of thinking, in beings as such.
As such, encounter it so unquestioningly that we do not even notice this encounter itself. Nor does anything compel us to notice it. Our thinking is free either to pass over the difference without a thought or to think of it specifically as such. But this freedom does not apply in every case. Unexpectedly, it may happen that thinking finds itself called upon to ask, what does it say, this being that is mentioned so often? If being here shows itself concurrently as the being of, thus in the genitive of the difference, then the preceding question is more properly, what do you make of the difference if being as well as beings appear by virtue of the difference, each in its own way? To do justice to this question, we must first assume a proper position face to face with the difference. Such a confrontation becomes manifest to us once we accomplish the step back. Only as this step gains for us greater distance does what is near give itself as such, does nearness achieve its first radiance. By the step back, we set the matter of thinking, being as difference, free to enter a position face to face, which may well remain wholly without an object.
Okay, now, here's where a lot of mistakes are made. I just want to draw your attention to not how to read this. Okay, so when you hear this, don't remember read this. Remember not how to read this. Do not read it this way. Often in postmodern philosophy and work, the notion of being, capital B being, is seen then as the question of difference, as this thing called difference. So God is difference, Dasein is difference. And he's saying that this is as wrong as thinking that there are different forms of little b beings. Of course there are different forms of little b beings, but the little b beings are segments, and the big B being is the zero. Think of it in that one, and therefore the difference is what is this relationship between 0 and 1, and it's always a plurality when you have the segment, and the big B being is always a singularity, but taken together, that creates the notion of difference that is a multiplicity. So, translation, don't use difference as thinking this cup is, quote, different than this pencil. That's not the kind of difference that's being said here. Nor is the difference that within this cup, let's say this cup is God, or let's say this cup is Dasein, that this represents difference. He's saying that it's everywhere. It's not like God is everywhere. He's saying that difference is everywhere, but it's everywhere not because it's a segment, but because the relationship between the Dasein and the, I don't want to use the word between, the relationship that is encountered with being and Dasein, with little b being and Dasein, this encountering is precisely what forms difference. It's the encounter. And in order for it to, quote, make sense, he calls that the event of appropriation.
They encounter on difference or in difference.
On difference, I think,
Yeah.
and as difference.
The difference is the abyss that they somehow precipitate or float into.
But it's not an abyss.
No, but it's an abyss if we think of it
It's not an
from the
in-between.
point of view of a ground that is no longer there. But otherwise, it's just the fact that they have not collapsed into one unarticulated thing that doesn't have any meaning, but they've got a distribution. And so this is there is some empty space in between.
Got it? Do you think that makes sense?
Can we say
Kate?
that being is coded and beings are uncoded?
No. Why do you think you could say that?
That being,
You think about revealing and concealing.
yeah.
I would say that they're both coded.
What's the code? If you say something is coded and something is uncoded, depends on what you mean
I
by
mean,
the code.
it
as
has
well.
an identity, it has a pattern and repetition.
Just think of 1 versus 0.
Yeah.
Think of, yes?
Isn't the pattern that they create difference between each other? Not the ones in between.
Not
in the
between,
encounter.
like for example, let's put it like
Encounter.
slightly, let's look at this. See this thing? That has, you would say that this has created a pattern, but it's not a normal pattern. But it is a normal pattern, it's completely a normal pattern. It's just not a geometrically formed pattern that is repeating like this. So if you understand that this pattern encounters itself, and in so encountering it forms the ground of the groundless ground of the event. It is a pattern, but it's this kind of pattern. It's this kind of, squiggly pattern. What Mandelbrot later on will identify as fractal.
Isn't the difference in you saying that your event of procreation and seeing it as 0 as 1, and my difference would be just for argument's sake, is a mess. It's different procreation that creates the difference in the way that we encounter
Great.
the thing.
Great. Say that again, so that people can hear you.
Yeah, it's a mess.
No, not that part.
It create, in the encounter it creates the difference, so it's only enabling.
Yes.
And rather than say I will see it as an S, you will see it as a pattern and a fractal argument, and that's a different discourse and a logic, whereas I wonder where dust panels or something like that,
But
it creates a difference.
but in putting it like that,
Yeah.
so that's not quite the thing that I didn't realize. In putting it like that, that's invoking intentionality and invoking a perspective. And that he's not invoking any of the perspectives or
Yeah, so
intentionality.
there's no intentionality involved.
So it's not like I think it's one way, you think it's that way, and we're sort of being liberal about it, so you can go off thinking it's a mess and I will go off thinking it's fractals. It is both of those things at the same time.
Yeah, and everyone else.
And everyone else.
Because it happens without happening on a pre-laid space.
Yes.
Or on a pre-laid categorical dimension.
Yes, hence groundless ground. Now, I just want to, because we're at 3:30 now, so what I know it's just been, it's probably too fast to do this, but if we could just turn to the very last chapter, which is on finitude, called conclusion. Actually, maybe we should do it slightly. Okay, if you turn to 204, which is not quite the end, he's going to reappropriate the word abyss. Not now to mean some cavernous hole in between, or anything to do with it in between, but he's using the German Abgrund in terms of the spacing of the ground, the not, you got it, 204? Page 204? Okay, so he says here, we have been given the modern crusade to refuse all givens. The culprit is the basic problem of metaphysics. We forget to ask what is the ground that enabled modern technology to discover and set free new energies in nature. Forgetting about being lets us take the credit for our actions. Oh, that's, sorry. Further down. Okay, sorry. 204, down in the middle. This abyss, Abgrund, can disturb. This is what. So it's not this void, this empty, let's say, scenario that that where the abyss is like the big dark hole, where you fall into the abyss and you never are again heard from. Rather, the abyss is precisely that which creates the disturbance. This abyss, Abgrund, can disturb. We demand responsible reasoning behind our actions and belief, but this requirement itself can have no reason. And it's this sentence here, just hold that sentence, and if you go further on to, I'm sorry, I'm just going a little bit fast here, to now we get to the conclusion. He talks about finitude. Braver talks about finitude, and he calls it original finitude. And this thing, original finitude, is going to be the groundless ground. It's finite in the sense that it has, right, they want us to be quiet. That's not, God lives. Anyway, it's finite in the sense that it has these, let's say, intelligible edges, except they're not really edges, they're just this thing that's all together. So Wittgenstein, let us be human. Heidegger, it is precisely a question of becoming certain of this finitude in order to hold oneself in it. So, we've just run out of time, I'm so sorry, but I think that if you just concentrate on literally those two phrases, or even just Wittgenstein's let us be human. This has nothing to do with being post-human, non-human, unhuman, anti-human, pro-animal. It is about the way in which the difference asserts itself with vitality. And it's disturbing. He's calling that the messy, the human. That's what the human is. Freud's going to call it the neurosis. It's the human. You cannot be human without being neurotic, says Freud. Okay, I'm sorry that we're going to have to close this and then move over to, yes, sorry.
So it just sets up a space of representation, no matter which one. And then the difference.
No, representation is not on the plot.
It's no longer on the plot.
Yeah, it's no longer in the plot. But what becomes part of the plot now is this thing called original finitude. And that's what's going to give meaning where it was a beforehand representation. Yeah. Okay, question I have for everybody before we rush on to here, Mattia.
What was it? I forgot what I was supposed to say.
Great. Try and remember the taxi ride. What would you like to do next week? Do you want to try and wrap this up properly, or are you dying and want to get out of this? Grace is thinking what? What do you think?
I'm okay with this. I'd like to finish it.
You would like to finish it?
Yeah, I'd like to get as original finishing.
Okay. And then once we do original finitude, I think we are well placed to go into object-oriented philosophy, or after finitude, or after, the Meillassoux book, something like that. I think it would be worthwhile taking a look at. But I don't want to go in a direction that's not going to help you in your work. So will that help you?
Because I think like Parisius, she's not really doing object orientated. She's sort of making a move away from that, but on the other hand, it sort of overlaps. So that would be helpful.
Okay, there's a very interesting book out that I repressed the name and the author of. It's called
I know that one.
It's something like heterologics and the end of the world, something like that. If we can someone Google that, heterologics and the end of the world? Something like that will come up. So a person will hopefully come up with that attached to it. Because I mean, obviously, Haruki, what's his name, has Hard-Boiled America and the End of the World. So obviously, they've stolen it from that. Do you find it? Anybody find it? It's like something logics and the end of the world. No?
Seven Signs.
Timothy somebody.
Silent
Timothy.
middle in the color.
Try Timothy Morton. Maybe somehow that seems right to me.
Philosophy and ecology after the end of the world.
That's it.
Hyperobjects.
Hyperobjects. Okay, that's it. It has nothing to do with heterologics. It has to do with hyperobjects. Hyperobjects
It's
in the end of the
Timothy
world.
Moulton, yeah?
Yeah, I think, is that his last name, Morton?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim Morton.
Philosophy and ecology after the end of the world, post-humanity.
Timothy Moulton.
Okay. Ready to go on to Plan B?
So that's our next reading, yeah?
No, our next reading is going to be this last chapter.
Yeah.
And the rest of Heidegger. Just reread the perdurance thing. So I feel that it's gotten lost in the shuffle. We're getting there. And there is some paper toweling over there, Mark.
Go on, thank you.
No, there, by the filing cabinet. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, those technical items. Actually, it's dialectical spectral. Thank you, Mark. You get that part there?
I haven't got it.